All right. Alderman Van Buskirk.
Present.
Alderman Moore.
Excused.
Alderwoman Black.
Here.
Alderman Ward.
Here.
We have one more. Alderman Azier.
Excused. Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the June 19, 2018 meeting minutes. Okay, do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Black, a second by Mr. Ward. If you'd like to just call the roll, Mr. Damon, or Mr. Hodges, please.
Alderman Ward.
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk.
Yes.
Alderwoman Black.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda is a discussion relative to some possible changes in the animal control ordinance. And Mr. Haydaripoor, if you would address us with the proposed changes, please.
Good evening. As you're aware that currently we have a contract with the local veterinary service as far as sheltering and boarding the animal we impound. Per city code, when we impound an animal, we have to board that animal up for about 10 days. And sometimes it goes beyond 10 days. It depends what day of the week it falls, including the weekends. So in many cases, it goes beyond 10 days. And the city staff and animal control officer, they do their best in order to locate an owner. If we can locate an owner, to have a microchip, we do our best to locate an owner, whether it's in town or out of town. What I mean by out of town, metro area. And sometimes even we call out of state. But in many cases, whether we are not able to locate an owner or the owner do not redeem their animals. After the 10 days is up, we release the animal, whether we release it to the agreement we have with Midwest Animal Rescue, and they find a place for him and they adopt him out, or whether for whatever reason maybe an animal is sick or injured in a condition that needed to be euthanized. But majority of the animals that we have, we're able to transfer those animals to Midwest Animal Rescue for adoption. So the staff looked at the surrounding cities, and the majority of the surrounding cities, currently they have 5 days holding period. Also, the Department of Agriculture, their holding period regulations also up to 5 business days. So staff looked at the information and we did the search. Cities like Lee Summit, Independence, Raymore, and Grandview. In every one of those cities, their holding period is 5 days. So based on the information in the surrounding cities, we thought maybe we can revisit this regulation and maybe reduce it to 5 days so we meet the parameters of surrounding cities, Department of Agriculture, and the state of Missouri. Having said that, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
So this would be a cost savings to the city, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
There is a good chance it'll be cost savings. If we reduce the boarding period from 10 days to 5 days, there'll be a good chance there'll be a good cost saving. I have not sat down and calculate how much the cost savings will be. That also depends. Every year, the boarding fees goes up, and it depends on the number of animals we impound. So if you compare the budget that we had from the last few years to this year is considerably more than the previous years.
Are vaccinations normally given by the veterinarian prior to release the animals?
If we impound an animal and we can locate an owner, or owner come and release the animal and they don't have vaccination, then yes, it's required to have vaccinations.
What about the time period for animals that are impounded because they may be dangerous or they've bitten a human or attacked another animal? Will that change at all?
That particular regulation is, if an animal bites an individual, whether have an owner or not, we have to quarantine the animals for 10 calendar days. And we cannot reduce that to 5 days at this time.
So that would stay
That will stay the same 10 days.
the same. What about a diseased animal? Do you know, I know there are animals that are impounded sometimes that are diseased, and you wouldn't want to release those animals in 5 days probably to be with other animals. I'm sure they're quarantined.
If the clinic determined that an animal's sick or injured, in many instances we contact Midwest Animal Rescue and they look at the animal, see if the animal's in a condition to be saved, then we'll transfer the animal to Midwest Animal Rescue, and they've been very helpful in working with us. They're taking the animals.
With a diseased or injured animal,
Yes,
they would assist with that?
Yes.
Okay.
If they believe that this animal, they are able to save it and give it the treatment and the care that it needs, then yes.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Yes, my turn?
Yeah, well, I'm confused. Are you Mark Moore?
I'm Mark Moore.
Okay. All right. Ms. Black, go ahead.
Thank you, Ray, for investigating and backing all of us up on this, in a sense. I don't know the exact cost savings, but I would assume that, no, I'm not going to assume, I would say it will be at least half for at least our first year, depending on if the boarding fees go up. But in all actuality, what's most important is the best interest of the animals. Midwest will take diseased and sick animals, and they'll quarantine them as necessary and get them healthy, or foster them into a home where they can be given the proper care. So I'm all for this. I want the 5 days all the way around for just the benefit of the animals. We're doing them a disservice by making them stay there longer.
I agree. I mean, staff see and agree with that views. And then we believe that it will be savings, but I can't really determine. I mean, if you look at the paper, yes, we're reducing the days in half. So you think the cost savings should be in half. But again, it depends. A lot of time we go beyond the 10 days. In this situation, we might go beyond 5-6 days. In particular, if we have owner, sometimes owner, they come in and they say, well, I don't have the money to pay for the fees right now. Can you hold the animal for a couple more days? Then we hold the animals for several more days. In many instances, we had to hold the animal for at least 5-6 days extra beyond the 10 days. So looking at it, yes, but I really can't sit down and right now and say, okay, we're going to save. If the budget was $75,000, I can't say we're going to save $35,000. So it's very difficult for me to.
Okay, I'll give you that, but how many times does an owner ask you to keep the animal until he can get the money together, and how often is Dr. Rose okay to do that?
Well, Dr. Rose will keep the animal as long as we ask him to keep the animal.
Well, sure, he's getting the money from us, why not? Okay.
But if an owner comes in and asks us, can you hold the animal for a couple more days? We say, sure, we'll do that. But then we'll charge them those extra days. It's not that we're going to hold them for free.
Okay.
But then in many instances also the owner comes in and said, I don't have the money right now, can I come back next week? But they don't show up next week. So we end up holding the animals for several more days and paying Dr. Rose or Raytown Animal Hospital for those days, but then we're not going to be able to recoup the money. Now, if we have their information, then our next step is to write citations. In those instances, we write several citations for at-large, abandonment, fees, license, and shots. So we write at least 5 more tickets if we have their information in order for them to appear in court and abandon the animal.
Okay. One more question, though. How many other animal control facilities agree to hold animals until the owner has the fees? That's just kind of flabbergasting to me, I guess.
Well, again, I have not talked to every city about that particular part, but I assume from my previous experiences with Kansas City and a couple of code officers I've talked to, sometimes they do hold them for extra days.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ray, for taking care of this.
No problem.
Mr. Ward?
So I'm not opposed to the plan of reducing that from 10 days to 5 days. I've talked to people that I trust, on this subject, and they all say that's very reasonable. But one of the, I guess, facts or situations that came to light as I was doing my research, and I'm going to ask you at the end of this if this is correct, but it was explained to me that no person other than the lawful owner is allowed to claim that animal. So if you had a case where somebody boards their dog at one of the local vets, and for whatever reason that dog escapes and is caught by our animal control people and impounded, even though the owner's on vacation for 10 days, they boarded that dog or that animal with the vet, that vet would not be able to go down and retrieve that dog, even if, say, as part of its escape, it broke its leg and it needed medical treatment. Is that correct?
If we impound an animal and we have good information of the owner of the animal, then we do our best to locate the owner.
Right, but the owner's out of town. They're in Hawaii for 10 days.
Then if we can locate a veterinarian that they took the animal to, then we contact that veterinarian also.
Is that authorized by our ordinance?
To take the animal there?
Yes.
No, we don't take the animal anywhere else. We hold the animal in our veterinarian service. But we contact that veterinarian and see if there is somebody else, whether family members or somebody that they can.
Okay, well, I don't have any local family here, so that concerns me. And so I've prepared some amendments to this that would be targeted mostly at addressing that situation. And I've talked to at least one well-renowned vet here in the city, and they said they would be absolutely fine if they had the option to go down to the facility where these animals are impounded. Maybe he can reach me, she can reach me, and I'll say, yeah, go ahead and take care of my dog. I'll pay whatever it takes. But under the current ordinance, as I understand that, even if I sent a letter, they would not. The ordinance doesn't allow the dog to be released to them.
That's correct.
And so what I've done is I've created an amendment that would basically say that if my vet chooses to accept the responsibility because of their relationship with me, they will be authorized, and our impoundment facility would be directed to release that to them. And as long as they, use basic common sense, they wouldn't be held responsible for that. Let's see, I'm also concerned that our ordinance is perhaps a little out of date and doesn't really contemplate the presence of microchips and doesn't really reflect the fact that maybe some dogs would be tattooed. So I just added some additional language in there too that says, hey, when these dogs are impounded, we need to be scanning for these, and we need to follow the normal procedures. And oh, by the way, if it's got a tag that says take me to Raytown Gregory, that they'll reach out and make that phone call.
We do scan the animals, every single animal, even cats, if it's not feral. We do scan them for microchip.
Oh, I'm sure we do, but the ordinance doesn't direct us to do that, correct?
No, but part of the ordinance, if it's animals at large, per ordinance, we have to microchip it, so we scan it for that reason. If an
Right,
animal
but there's
goes-
nothing in the ordinance that says if we find it and we scan it and we get a number that we have to do anything with that. We could just, under our current ordinance, we could just say that's interesting, the dog's chipped, and hold it and not contact anybody. Now, I'm not saying we would, but there's nothing in our ordinance that directs our contractor to do anything different.
No, the contractor don't scan the animals. We scan the animals, and if we have a chip, then we locate the owner through that chip. But the contractor, no, the contractor don't scan the animals for us.
Okay, so I may need to make a change to that too. Okay. But that's basically the point of purpose of my amendment. I mean, as long as we're opening this up and looking at it and trying to make it better, I think there's a couple other opportunities to address us. I mean, I just, for some people, their dogs and their pets are their family, and I would just hate for a case of where they charge a local vet to, hey, take care of my dog. The dog gets out and needs medical care, and we're telling, sorry, we know you're the vet. It says it on the tag, but we can't do anything until we reach these people that are on walkabout in the middle of the Australian outback. So
That's correct. I mean, that's a correct statement that we don't release the animal to anybody else except the owner or somebody on owner's behalf. Sometimes
well, our ordinance doesn't say that you can release it on somebody's behalf, does it?
owner's behalf. If an owner contact us and say, my daughter, my son, my dad, mom, coming over to pick up the animals, and we confirm that with the owner, then we do release it.
Okay.
But again, it's if a veterinarian or a pet owner have that agreement with the veterinarian, then some sort of documentation or confirmation we have to get from the pet owner.
Yeah, okay.
In order to do that, then yes, we will probably
Okay.
have to amend the code in order for us to be able to do that.
Well, as long as we're doing this, I mean, I'd like to do that, and I'd like to work with you over the next couple of weeks to get the language that makes sense to you and makes sense to all of us up here and with the local vets too. But I didn't seem to gather that there was any reluctance on their part to, I think they all thought that was a good idea to be able to do that if they've got a good relationship with somebody that says, yeah, here's my credit card, take care of it, so.
Sure.
It was talking about the 5-day waiting period. That's a minimum of 5 days, right? So you
Yes.
have flexibility.
Yes, that's the
related to
minimum of
that.
5 days, not less than 5 days, and that's what the Department of Agriculture language is.
Right, and that appears to be the language in most of the cities that have that in their ordinances. Well, as Mr. Ward was talking about, I guess one of my concerns would be that there might possibly be a situation where it might not be a vet boarding that animal, but could be a neighbor or a family member, or, some acquaintance that's taking care of the pet and the pet gets loose. But in that case, if the owner contacts you and indicates that someone else could pick the animal up on their behalf, that could happen.
Sure,
And if
we do.
Okay. But I'd hate to see a situation where someone is out of town on vacation, an animal gets loose and it's impounded, and, whoever was taking care of it maybe didn't make contact with you or didn't make contact with them, and then the animal goes out, possibly to be adopted by someone else, and we certainly wouldn't want that to happen.
Sure. Again, from my previous conversation with the previous management, which they are here no longer, that was one of the main reasons they went to 10 days. Because at that time, the Department of Agriculture still was 5 days, which still is. But then they decided to go to 10 days based on the scenario you just described. Some people are going to go out of town for more than 5-6 days, a week maybe. That's why they extended those holding periods to 10 days. That's my conversation was with the previous management.
Mr. Ward?
And so I understand that, and that's part of my concern, but having talked to people that I trust, I mean, the average seems to be about 3 days. So I guess my solution for dealing with that, instead of making every dog be held for another 5 days, is just to place a little more burden on the city staff and on our contractor to do a little more research and a little more due diligence to try and establish that connection. And so that, to me, I think that's a fair trade-off.
I agree.
Anyone else have any comments or questions for Ray?
What do we do to get this on the next agenda
What-
for the BOA meeting?
Well, my suggestion would be that if we want to move forward with this, and we have a quorum here of our committee, if we want to move forward to propose this to be a resolution to come to us, and then at that time, Mr. Ward could come and make any, and if you want to discuss that with Ray in the interim, make any amendments.
I'd like Ms. Black to be involved.
Or Ms. Black, or whoever wants to make amendments at that time, and you could have discussion with Ray. And, but we could go ahead and move this forward to come as a resolution to the full board if that's where we want to go. Ms. Black.
Could we have that then maybe on the October 30th meeting?
Our next meeting will be November 13th.
November 13th meeting?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
You good? You good with that? And we could bring that forward as a resolution to the full board. Okay, at that time. Are you making a motion to that effect?
I'm making a motion, yes, sir.
Then I'll say.
Yeah.
Just want to make a comment here on page 3 of Alderman Black that provided some of the documentation. Just want to make a clarification on that. On page 3, I would say sentence 3 to 5. It says, it is unsettling to hear of the 10-day stay hold mandated by a veterinary clinic holding stray dogs in the Raytown, Missouri. The 10-day hold is not mandated by the veterinary clinic. It's a city code that requires to hold a meeting for 10 days. I just want to make it clear.
So it's mandated by ordinance. And
Yes.
I do need to make a correction too. I said a resolution, but we would actually need to make amendments to our ordinance
That's
to
correct.
the effect to change it to 5 days. And so I misspoke. And I think we could move forward with making an amendment for the 5 days, and then if there are further amendments to that, at the time we bring that to the full board, then they can come before us. Is that acceptable with you, Mr. Ward? Or would you like to make other amendments to that now?
Well, I guess my thought was, and this is maybe a question for our city attorney here, but yeah, I would have thought that what we would do is we would study this, and then I thought this committee would enact a resolution asking the full board to make these changes. Is that not the proper process?
I mean, you could either bring it back to your committee to review your changes and then send it to the board, or you can say, like what's being proposed now by Alderman Van Buskirk, to say that you'll move it to the board with disapproval along with any agreed upon changes to the ordinance.
So I guess my thought, what I would prefer to do, and if it's without objection, is to let Ms. Black and I work with city staff to kind of come up with a solution to all this, bring it back to this committee at the November 13th, and if it's agreeable, we would then pass a resolution recommending that the full board take it up.
On that evening?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Well, to bring it back to this committee would not meet November 13th. It would meet.
So you're talking about bringing it back to our committee?
If you bring it back to the committee will be meeting again. We're looking at probably November 20th.
I would be able to have it brought to the board on the 13th, so.
Actually, be November 27th, I believe.
So it would not be possible to bring it back to our committee in that time period. But, and I think if we're offering additional amendments from our committee to that, then it needs to come from the full committee and for those additional amendments. Or should come from the full committee as a recommendation to the full board. My thought was that we could go forward with making the change to the resolution from 10 days to 5 days. And then, it would, at the time that ordinance change or an ordinance amendment comes before the full board, then other proposals for amendments to that could be brought forth from Alderman Ward or Alderman Black to the full board at that time.
And voted on then as well?
and it would be voted on
Yeah,
it.
I mean, that's fine. I just didn't realize we went 6 weeks without another municipal meeting.
Well, we have another municipal, actually it'll be November 20th. November 13th will be the Finance Committee, along with the board meeting, and November 20th will be another municipal meeting.
And the election's going to fall in there on the
November
first
6th is the
Tuesday.
election date, so that's why we moved back to
Okay.
November 13th. But regardless, the November 20th will be your next municipal meeting.
So if we could do that at the earlier time, did you say 13th?
The 13th will be your
Okay.
next.
We could do it at that time if we move forward with an amendment to the ordinance, change it from 10 days to 5 days, and then when that comes before the full board, then any other amendments to that can be brought forth.
I mean,
That sound acceptable?
It's up to you as a committee, but I mean, I believe if you can come up with what you desire, either, I got pretty much what you're saying, Alderman Van Buskirk, is that you all can agree upon the 5 days.
Right.
But you want to see those changes before they go before the full board?
Right, and then the other amendments could come forward to the full board at that time.
Okay.
We're getting some head shaking from our,
Yeah, otherwise we would have to,
So can we have a special meeting on October 30th?
I can't answer that as far as a special meeting with the committee. It'll be up to you all, but that, regarding that special committee.
I'm fine either way. I mean, to me, the date that all these changes happened is not important, and it sounds like it's important to you, and that's fine with me. So I'm happy to do it either way.
is there a reason we want to do this in a
I'd
quicker
like-
time period, or?
I'd like for it to fall in line with the budget.
Okay, that's fine.
So I will leave that up to the committee, and you made a motion now, and do you want to make a motion to make the amendment from 10 days to 5 days? Is that the motion you want to make? And bring that to the full board, or what do you want to do with it?
Yes.
In which case, I'll second that.
Are you acceptable
Thank
with that? Okay, in that case, it will come, if we agree to this, we'll take a vote here in just a second, but if we agree to this, then it would come to the full board on November 13th, and then if there are any other amendments to be brought forth at that time from Alderman Ward or Alderman Black or any other alderman at that point in time, they would have the opportunity to do that. Okay? And in the meantime, you can meet with Ray and discuss it, okay? And certainly I'd be happy to be involved in those discussions as well. Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Just to make sure, so you're saying in between that time that you would come and give Ray any amendments, so we better propose and be aware of those and vet those amendments before they get before the full board.
I think they
Yes.
should, I think certainly you should be aware of those amendments that are going to be coming forward, and Ray should be aware of those, and I would like to be aware of them myself, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
That'd be great. Yeah.
All right,
That's why we're a team.
okay. So if you would take the roll,
Okay.
we have a motion to amend the ordinance from 10 days to 5 days.
Okay.
And that's the only change at this point in time.
And that motion was,
Ms. Black made that motion. Mr. Ward seconded that.
okay. Alderman Black,
Yes.
Alderman Ward,
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hodges, do you have anything else for us this evening?
No, we do not have anything else. The one item that was tabled regarding liquor license will be brought before you in a December meeting. I'll need to do additional information regarding that one before we
Very
bring it
good.
before you.
Thank you. My intention was to ask you where that was at. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. If there are no other discussion from the board, Our next regularly scheduled meeting is November 20th. And ask for a motion for adjournment.
A motion.
I second that motion.
We have a motion to adjourn by, to adjourn by, I've got my amendments and adjournments mixed up here. To adjourn by Ms. Black, a second by Mr. Ward. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.